All righty. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this evening's event. My name is Ed Vick, and I'm in the events department at the University Bookstore, the oldest independent bookstore in Seattle. Every year, Galaxy Press holds a prestigious international writing and illustrating competition for unpublished creators, or small published, judged by the most famous names in the industry, like Kevin G. Anderson, Brandon Sanderson, and the great Larry Niven. Illustrator judges have included Frank Frazetta, Jack Kirby, and Echo Chernik. Writers of the Future has historically and repeatedly launched the future of modern speculative fiction. Past writer winners include Nnedi Okorafor, Patrick Rothfuss, and Dave Wolverton. Past Illustrator winners include Frank Wu, Omar Rayyan, and Sergey Poyarkov. Tonight, we're thrilled to bring you Zack Be and Brock Aguirre, who have been selected as a writer and an illustrator winner, respectively, in the just published Writers of the Future, Volume 36. Zack is a writer, musician, former rehabilitation counselor, and current couple and family therapist living in Washington, D.C. Brock spent 2 years at the Academy of Art University and hopes to attend the California Institute of the Arts with the goal of starting a studio focusing on animated science fiction and fantasy films. You can purchase the new volume of Writers of the Future from our website using the book link that will be put up below from time to time. We can mail it out to you, or if you're in the Seattle area, you can pick it up at our store using our curbside service. We thank you for your continued support. If you have any questions for Brock and Zack, please type them into the chat field for a Q&A period. I'm very pleased now to present Brock Aguirre and Zack Be. Say hi.
Hey, Ed,
everybody.
Thanks.
Beautiful.
Appreciate the introduction.
This is good. It's a good start.
It's hard with this Zoom thing because the timing is always like we're responding at the same time and then trying to like respond. It's a little off. I get it, but I appreciate everything you said. It's really an honor to be able to do this. I've never, been in something of the such. So thank you.
Can
It's
I just
cool.
say
It's
ditto?
cool. Yeah. We're going to start with Zack talking a little bit about his story and then giving us a reading. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Sounds very good.
All right.
Okay, so the story I wrote is called As Able to Err. A little fun background about this story is that I actually submitted it once to Writers of the Future and it got rejected. This is a little known kind of thing about Writers of the Future. You can resubmit stories after they've been rejected, and the version that got submitted that got rejected and the version that got accepted are pretty dissimilar from one another. So this is kind of like just a reminder that editing is really the most important part of the writing process. I picked a selection, like a little portion of the story to read today. You're going to need a little background to understand what's going on. Basically, we've got this guy, Erto. He's a landmine decommission expert. He lives in a world where there's just sort of a constant proxy war going on with drones. And he's in a command center far away from the battle, and he works with a robot, a drone named Dart. They have let me put it this way, he's fond of Dart. And I'm going to pick up the story right after they've tried to decommission a bomb, and they did it successfully, but Erto was kind of freaking out a little bit, worried that Dart was going to get blown up. Here we go. Perhaps you need rest, sir. Perhaps. Dart began to walk away from the contact site. Erto sat for a moment, listening to the familiar crunch of his partner's 6 legs and the soft whir of his engine. Somewhere inside, a gyroscope spun like a heart. Dart, how are you? The machine did not respond. Dart, my OS is fully updated and my physical diagnostic was satisfactory, he said. You can find my most recent report in the cloud storage. Will there be anything else? Erto was almost too embarrassed to ask. He felt so very far away from his friend. I was just wondering if you'd like me to stay online with you, to keep you company on the way back. It's a long walk. I'll run, the mine removal drone said. And I don't have anything to say at this time. Sorry, sir. No, of course, Erto replied, forcing a little chuckle. What am I thinking? I should get that rest. Yes, sir. Permission to disconnect? Dart asked. Yeah. I mean, granted. The screens faded to a dull gray in Erto's helm, and the straps fell away automatically. The whole contraption began to rise, dragged easily off the operator's head and into the ceiling above by vines of fiber optic wire. Erto pulled his arms out of the tongue and rubbed his eyes. Why had he said any of that to Dart? He must have sounded desperate. The low red shade of the small operational suite shifted then to its obnoxious white floodlights, dragging Erto to his feet. The door raised and he climbed out onto the frigid gunmetal catwalk of the OPSEC. 100 other orbs like Erto's compartment lined either side of the walkway, their rusting curves obscured by perspiring pipes and webs of fiber optic cabling. Large AC units chilled the massive chamber down to uncomfortable temperatures to ensure no ops could be botched by overheated machinery, at least on Erto's end. All of this hung above a deep black chasm, the lower level of which supposedly housed an emergency water reservoir. Erto could not see the bottom. He strode quickly toward the exit, handing his OPSEC key pass through a kiosk window to a woman cloaked in a heavy winter jacket. Shivering through the Arctic shroud and shouldering a wall of plastic strips, Erto climbed his way to the tall, minimal white halls of the surface concourse. He passed all manner of military and corporate officials, most of whom couldn't be bothered to look up from their tablets. It was all right, though. Erto had nothing to say to them anyways. After being denied the conversation he wanted, Erto simply needed to disappear into his bed. His appetite was gone. The soft, shuffling malaise of the war complex reminded him a great deal of those lonely ghost-hour monorail journeys from his old coding job in the capital city to the coalition-subsidized apartment hive he called home. Over years, the city's endless flurry had turned opaque in Erto's eyes. The crowd was a form of isolation unto itself, the bitter truth being that beneath the deafening metallic grind of the city's infernal infrastructure, no one was really trying to talk anyways. Erto had little trouble abandoning the churning capital for the less exacerbating military frontier. A din of silence hung around the war complex with startling sincerity. The quiet here, not enforced by authority or drowned by chaos, was sublime. Sometimes it was easy to forget altogether that there was a war going on. The complex was so far from the fighting that the war zone disappeared around the curve of the earth, making the conflict as invisible to the naked eye as it was silent to the ear. The door to his quarters in the subcom slid open with a satisfying swish, and immediately the harsh spots in the ceiling illuminated his Spartan accommodations. A bed, a chair, and a desk, each fused to the rigid gray walls and floor. He hated thinking of this cell as a home, but it was all he had known for months. Kill the lights, Erto told the room before falling into his bed. Facing his pillow, he began counting the 26 mines they had removed that night, hoping he could find proof that Dart was off by one, despite the photographic evidence to the contrary. It would be so great to catch Dart in a fallacy like this and watch, or listen anyways, to his friend try to compute his way out of the mistake. As he pondered each mental image, the world began to slow down, and he was able to take the deepest breath he had in hours. Sleep was imminent. Instead, a square of light appeared on the wall across from his bed, and a loud ringing vibrated Erto's room. He sat upright and read the message on the screen. Answer, answer, he said. The screen went white, then black, and then filled with a low pixel count video of a woman at a desk in what looked like Erto's capital city apartment. Erto, how are you? She said. Tired, very tired, he replied. Oh no, were you sleeping? I didn't mean to wake you, she said. Your calendar says you're usually off work around now. No, I am. It was a long day. I'm sorry to hear that, baby. Do you want to talk about it? Erto looked at the clock inset on a nearby wall. It would be dawn soon locally, and he couldn't remember what time it was in the capital. You wouldn't want to hear it, he said. Oh, please, she crossed her arms. What's the point of having special access like this if you aren't going to talk to me? Erto let out a sigh and tried to smile. Is that mate? He asked, pointing at the cup of tea next to her hand. Your mother had some sent to your apartment, she said. She left you a message. Tell me about it, the tea. It's warm and smooth and very sweet, like you like it, she said. It's not my favorite, but I get it. It's fine. You prefer it green? I prefer it coffee, she said, and laughed as she sipped from the cup. But I was thinking of you, so I thought I'd have some. What else did my mother's message say? Something about you not dying, she said. Do you want the full transcript? No, he replied, letting out a small laugh. How many times do I have to explain to her I'm not anywhere near the fighting? No one is, she responded. Dart is, Erto said, rubbing his temples. She put the cup down on the desk. Dart? She asked. Yeah, my partner. We've been working together for a couple of months. I know, she said. But isn't he a drone? It's not like that, Erto responded. It's not. Well, what is it like? She asked. Let's not talk about it, Erto said, falling to his side on the bed. Fine, I can tell you about my day. Okay. Work was tough. Commute was tough. There was nothing good on TV, she said. Then I stayed in, hoping to talk to you. I'm sorry. I know it's tough in the capital as well. I don't mean to ignore you. I'm just tense. And relax. It's all right. The conversation broke for a while, and Erto's heavy eyelids began to close, the glow of the screen falling over his face. You don't have to talk, she said finally. Okay, he mumbled, half asleep. You just have to listen. Erto's eyes opened again, and he watched her start to undo her blouse. Her bosom loosened, and he imagined he could reach his hand through the screen and sink into her milky white skin. Are you listening? She asked. Yes, he said. Yes, what? Yes, ma'am, he corrected, starting to sit up. Then get up, on your feet. Erto rose to attention and tried to wipe the sleep from his eyes. Put your hands down. Yes, ma'am. Now take it off, all of it, she said, undoing one more button on her blouse. Erto quickly removed his clothes and folded them on the corner of his bed just as she liked them. He stood again at attention in the crystalline light of the screen and waited, his body cold and warm all at once. Are you ready, boy? She asked. Yes, ma'am. Then listen very closely. That's where I'll stop.
All right. Yay. So, Writers of the Future is one of the two contests. The other contest is Illustrators of the Future. So, Brock gave a very short little intro. Let's have a little intro from Brock here, and then he can show off his art.
Sure. So, introduction regarding the piece, as able to air, or just in general?
Yes, of course.
Okay. So, I guess as an introduction in general, I'm 22. I live in Sammamish. I paint digitally on an iPad, and this was the illustration that I was able to put together for the story that Zack was just narrating, or at least this is what I was able to put together, and this story was so like addicting and how heartbreaking it was to me, which I really enjoy in a lot of fiction. Specifically just kind of like understanding how socially disconnected and like desperate Erto was. And you could even see in the little part that Zack was just reading, he was saying, like, I forgot the word he used, but he was like, oh, did I sound like this way to Dart? When he was referring to Dart, who's the AI, who's the drone. And it just gives you the cue that Erto is worried about his social discourse in relation to a drone. And that's how, to me, it seemed like that's how, isolated and withdrawn from social interaction that he is, being the drone pilot that he is. He, at least from my understanding, what Zack was trying to portray was how like robotic he was kind of forced to be as a drone pilot. And that's what I tried to capture in his expression. I wanted him to seem kind of hollow, kind of emotionally drained, and I guess just frustrated that his only friends were a drone and his girlfriend. And because I don't want to give away too much of the story, but I had a lot of fun exploring that concept. And it's funny timing too that it comes up now, because of the fact that we're all under quarantine and we kind of understand the feelings that Erto is going through, not being able to have any social interaction. He feels crazy. He's becoming friends with a drone. And I mean, I get it. I'm becoming friends with the posters on my wall at this point. So like, yeah, I really enjoyed the idea of a holographic girlfriend. That was like really fun to play with and just to explore. I'm trying to think of other story elements that I incorporated.
I see the vast landscape, kind of an empty landscape there.
Right, right. Oh, well, yeah. And what I was thinking of was, like he said, this proxy war that was going on between basically just pilots and drones. And all the pilots were up in the air and all the drones were fighting the war on the ground. And what you're left with is just a pile of scraps. And Airtow is I mean, Dart at the bottom with the little staff is basically, running around trying to decommission the mines.
I mean, something I loved about this art was the color palette that you used. There's something about the story that's very he works at night, so he's always
Hmm.
up all night, which is another thing that people do now that we're all in social isolation and everything. And
Yeah.
the the colors that you chose to use to sort of evoke that, it's perfect.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. That's totally what I was going for. I was going for like a soothing nighttime feel, but also like sci-fi glow,
Mhm.
lots of energy and neon.
Got it. Yeah. So Brock, how was your application process? You had pieces of art that you had to show to the judges? Is that how it started out?
Yeah, basically, I took two pieces that I worked on at school in the Academy of Art in San Francisco, which were a portrait, and one of them was a gouache painting, and as well as one piece that I worked on in my garage of like Mike Tyson landing an uppercut on Sonny Liston, and like knocking. Well, like I did like a different version of it where his jaw was like flying and shattered, and that was in charcoal. And basically, I just submitted those art pieces, and they liked them. If you want me to show them here, I totally could. I know which of the pieces I did.
If you can get at them pretty quickly, I think that'd be great.
Yeah, I can try for sure. Yeah, just one
While
minute.
you're looking, Zach, how, kind of the same sort of question, the application process, anything interesting?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, like I said just before I read from the story, I did submit previously that story and it got rejected. And then I messed around with it some more, and I a big part of the changes that came to it came from the program that I was in that I just graduated from, couple and family therapy program. You mentioned that at the beginning that I do couple and family therapy. Um, when I originally started writing the story, I was very focused on the idea of the drones, right? And kind of the tech of what futuristic drone warfare would be like. And you'll notice when you read the story, most of the tech is kind of gone. I took it out. And I replaced it with a lot more of a focus on the impact on Airtow, the impact on the people who have to interact with the robots, because we still have, like, no matter how good our AI gets, hopefully we'll still be around to interact with it. Maybe we'll get a T2 situation and we'll all be gone, but for the most part, we'll still be interacting with it. Yes. Shout out to see if it's somebody from the program, Catherine. Hi. In doing my work, working with people and thinking about the science of working with people, it really refocused the story on kind of the trauma. This guy's not in the war zone, but he's still clearly experiencing PTSD and a lot of other symptoms of different kind of mental health issues. So tried to wrap that all together in the story. And then it got accepted. And here we are.
Very cool. Something we were talking a little bit about before everybody else joined us was kind of that this is a bit of a dark story, kind of a dystopia almost. Can you address that and a little bit about your feelings about what you might want to write in the future?
Yeah, I feel like dystopias are easy right now. We can all kind of look around and see it's very easy to look at the world and think of ways to burn it down, right? It's a lot harder to sort of look at the world and think, how could this get better? What would it look like? And it's not to say that there wouldn't be drama in a world that's trying to improve itself, right? That would still be there. But I feel like that's kind of passé now to do the, not the golden age of sci-fi, right? It's, we're all going to have flying cars and we're going to go to Mars and everything's going to be happy and great. Certainly there was problems with some of the messages in some of those stories, right? But now I feel like a lot of the content that we get, a lot of the books and the movies and everything is so dystopian. It's really playing on people's fears about the end of the world and what that's going to look like. And I'm trying to challenge myself now to write a little bit differently. It's easy to do. Like I said, it's easy to destroy the world. I'm trying to think outside of the box and say, okay, how could the world be better? What kind of futures could we have where things are actually improving? And what's the drama in those stories? Maybe a little antiquated, but I think it could lead to some interesting stories and different things. This is not that for sure. As Able the Air is not that at all. But that's kind of the direction that I'm going at the moment.
So Brock, I do remember you were saying that you're thinking of going to Cal Arts. Does your animation desire, does that work into your art at all?
Yeah, well, it's funny that you bring that up because I didn't get into Cal Arts for the second time, which I'm willing to accept. And I mean, we all go through it sometimes. And first of all, I was super surprised to hear that Zach, your story didn't get in the first time, and then you said you made a lot of edits to it, and then now it's in. I'm so glad that happened. I mean, I'm sure suffering a rejection is painful. I've been there so many times with the art. I get it. But I'm really glad you made the decisions that you made towards focusing on like the characters and the emotions that they're going through the story, because what Erto is going through with that drain was the most powerful aspect to me, and I really appreciated it. So yeah, I didn't get into Cal Arts. It's funny, the past 6 months, I actually haven't really done a lot of drawing. I've been switching and trying to become a boxer. I know I'm coming on this show to like talk about how I'm like, hey guys, this is my
Tell us
illustration.
more, yeah.
No, and I don't want to switch the subject. That'd be ridiculous. But I still am a huge fan of animation. That's like everything I do at night is just watch animation. And I still really want to pursue that later on in life. But I definitely think an animator's spirit is in a lot of my illustrations for sure. Maybe in the one that I presented now, for the one for As Able to Air, to a certain extent. But I know in a lot of my other drawings, or illustrations, it's certainly has a lot of motion in it and a lot of action and a lot of just wild perspective, foreshortening and angles and just wild shit. Like that's my jam. It's what I love. And so yeah, I still have aspirations in animation, but right now I actually I really want to get into boxing, mainly for just mental health reasons, dude. For real. I mean,
You got to be physical during this time, right?
Oh my God, yeah, especially this, and not even that. I mean, to open up completely. I've struggled with depression since I was 9, and it's been really rough. And to be honest, pursuing a boxer's career and exercising like a madman has been the most effective treatment that I've ever had. And I've been happiest I've been since I was 9 in the past 6 months training. And so, and that's, I've just kind of decided, like, I love drawing and I love making art, and that's still always going to be a part of my life. But I got to do what I got to do to stay afloat, you know, because depression to me is a lot more dangerous than the ring.
Agreed.
Yeah.
So one of my main questions when I read the story, Zach, was, and having read your introduction, that your being a counselor and therapist really seems to have informed the story to a great extent. One question of mine was, you know, do you see chat boxes being important in therapy? But we also have a question on the sidebar about the mindfulness routine that's in the story, throughout the story. So could you do a little bit of talking about the technique that you use, the background of it, and if that was a real one?
It's I made it up for the story, but it is, the underlying process of it is a real mindfulness technique, which is just sort of centering yourself on a mantra, right? Now, in the story, I tried to make it a little bit more sinister by having it be like a robot forcing you to do a mantra, which is kind of, it feels icky, I think, when you hear that. What feels icky to me, now, I'm sure someone will get use out of it. I don't want to, you know, poo-poo anyone's experience of, you know, finding better mental health through this, but there actually are now mental health chatbots.
Hmm.
There's ads for them all over my Instagram because Facebook is listening to me all the time and knows that I'm talking about therapy a lot. So it's sending me, advertisements for chatbots on the internet. And it's bizarre. When you've been through the kind of training you get in something like the CFT program, it's bizarre to imagine such a personal experience being so completely impersonal, right? It's almost making a mockery of what is the art of therapy, which is that human connection, the ability to basically what chatbots do is they do something called reflection, right? Which is where you repeat words back to someone. There's more to it than just typing in words and then the machine figures out a way to change the grammar slightly and send it back to you, and that's going to somehow make you not depressed, right? So the chatbots and therapy is happening. I'll be very interested to see where it goes. It actually reminds me of, now that we're talking about it, A Gateway by Frederick Pohl. It's kind of a classic sci-fi novel where half the book is a robot doing psychoanalysis with the main character. If anyone's interested, I highly suggest you check that book out. It's a very interesting take on sort of what was happening between Dart and Airto. But basically, I think it's it's not the best thing in the world. But this is another thing where I'm thinking, okay, it's really easy for me to imagine the dystopia here. People trying to seek therapy through chatbots. What could be the positive outcomes of it? It seems like it actually worked for Airto in the story, right? So mindfulness is a very powerful tool. We could spend years talking about mindfulness. I'm even hearing Brock talk about boxing. Sometimes we forget that we're not just a passenger walking around in this robotic meat suit. Our whole body is our whole person, right? So being able to center your experience on your whole body and not just up in your brain, right, is very important. I don't box, but I do Brazilian jiu-jitsu. And at first I thought it was just going to be, a fun aside. And I realized, because I took that up at the same time I took up couple and family therapy, I realized being there, getting attacked, but having to stay calm, following your breathing, keeping sense of your entire body, it is a mindfulness exercise. And being mindful and being so present does help with things like depression and anxiety. I don't know if that answers your question, because there's a lot.
That's a lot to unpack there.
There's a lot to unpack in that idea, but yes, that was a real mindfulness technique. And I do actually do things like that with my patients. And I was kind of imagining, or I should say clients, not patients, sorry. I do kind of imagine what it would be like to have robots doing that with us. And I'm unsure about it, put it that way.
Yeah. Your mention of Fred Pohl and Gateway leads me into maybe asking a little bit about both of your influences. Brock, you got some info for us. Who have you liked? Who's inspired you?
Jack Kirby is the first and foremost name that is always just like number one in my books in terms of visual vocabulary expansion. He's just the shit. I love him. And obviously, like Frank Frazetta, I think it's weird. Like sometimes I'll make art and then I'll see something after the art is made, and it makes me feel like I'm realizing it in the future tense. And one of those was Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Yeah, I watched that movie and I was like, oh my God, this movie helped me discover how much, like, a different side of myself. You know what I mean? And like, that was a movie that made me feel like I loved myself more after watching it. And I mean, there's a few of those. The MCU as a whole is like a huge influence for me. But I think just a really like classic sci-fi film, like, Star Wars and Lord of the Rings. It's it's almost silly to bring those up because they're so like obvious staples. But I think like Lord of the Rings is probably the most influential. I watched all of those movies dozens of times from the time I was like 4 years old. When I was painting Daft Punk, I would listen to a lot of Daft Punk during this whole As Able to Air. I listened to it so much, I don't even like him anymore. But like, no, I still love him. But that's not like a visual influence, but it was kind of an auditory influence because it was always going while I was painting. I'm not sure about the science of transferring the influence between art forms. I know a lot of people talk about it all the time, like, you know, doing this art will help you be better at this art. But I don't know. It's kind of up in the air for me.
That's an argument I get in with people all the time, is whether or not we will even have all these separate art forms in the future, right? I've had this idea, right? If all art is basically instruments to create empathy, right? If we're able to, you know, I'm thinking about like Elon Musk, right? The neural net, imagining people being able to share empathy directly. With that, we could skip music, right? We could skip painting. I'm sure a lot of people are hearing that right now and being like, well, why would I want to? Because I love the way things sound. It's kind of like, imagine, follow the arrows all the way down, right? You hear something, it makes you feel something. If you could just feel something and it was really pure, what would that experience be like? Would it kind of be how, you know, there's certain ways of creating textiles we just don't do anymore because they're too slow, right? It would just slow us down. We don't make cars a certain way anymore because it's too slow, right? I'm imagining this kind of future where we can just, you know, however we would connect. Maybe it would be just like this. We would open up a little Zoom window and just shoot empathy back and forth at each other, and it would be amazing. And only, like, you know, hipsters with mustaches would be like, well, I still listen to music, you know. It's a possible future. Maybe it's a little out there, but
writing influences, moving on here.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's so many, right? Oftentimes when people say who are your favorites, I just say the next two things on my reading list. Right now I'm reading The Windup Girl by Paulo Bacigalupi, I think is how his name is pronounced.
Something like that.
That's a dirty future. It's really good. And then next on my list after that, I have Black Leopard, Red Wolf by Marlon James, which is like a sort of Afro fantasy. I don't really know because I haven't read it yet, but it's really good. In terms of influences, I would also start listing off a lot of musical influences as well. I mean, I'm a musician as well, so I think a lot in that way. Sigur Rós is a big one for me. The Mars Volta is another one that has a big influence on me. Of course, you got your Wilco and your Radiohead, bands like that. In terms of writers, not all of his stuff, but the first half of Dan Simmons' Hyperion series is truly some of the best science fiction you're ever going to read. And I hope everybody goes out and reads those books. Regardless of what you think of Dan Simmons, those two books are fantastic. And also comic books had a very huge influence on me growing up. So, you know, Alan Moore, Grant Morrison, and Warren Ellis especially had a huge, in fact, there's one panel in The Authority. I don't know if anyone knows that comic book, but The Authority, it's written by Warren Ellis and drawn by Brian Hitch, I think, or the artist. There's a panel in there that's got this big ship that they fly on and a bunch of, I don't know, like creatures around it. And that panel alone, there's no dialogue or anything in the panel. It's just they're flying through different universes. That panel influenced my first sale, which was to Asimov's. Before Writers of the Future, I sold to Asimov's this story called True Jing. And that panel alone, just the art and kind of the idea of the picture, I built a whole story off of that. So there's a lot of comic book in me that kind of comes through in some of the writing that I do.
Cool.
Yeah.
Dude, I'm so glad you listen to Sigur Rós. I've never met anybody else that listens to him, so just shout out to that. I hear you. That's awesome.
Very good. One of the questions on the sidebar is very interesting. Brock, talking about your tattoos, says skin art usually has deep meaning. I would think all the more so for an artist. You care to share the meaning behind some of your tats?
Yeah, dude, totally. Well, I personally, I've had a lot of meanings attached to a lot of my tattoos, but then I've also like kind of validated the viewpoint that you're allowed to just decorate your body and not have a paragraph about it. But one of the ones that I could share about is this one on my hand. It's a koi fish. I don't know if you can really see, but it's attached to it like a rune, a circular rune on my hand. And it's just one that it's the Atlantean language from the Disney movie Atlantis. And it says swim now.
Nice.
Dude, I love that movie. It's a great movie. So underappreciated. Oh my God. And the language is dope looking. Yeah. Anyway, so it says swim now, and it's a koi fish. And it's basically about kind of forthrightly overcoming any adversity as soon as you can. And meaning, like, for me, a lot of the times when life just hits you with a bender, you can just sit in a rut. And for me, it's like the longer you sit in that rut, the farther you're going to drown, the deeper you're going to drown into those darker waters. And so if you can just kickstart the engine, just get yourself to get up and swim now, it's going to be a lot better for you. And that's a lot of the times the hardest part is that first step. It's just get out of bed. It's just make the bed and then keep going. And then, so I mean, and it's a koi fish because koi fish turn into dragons, I think. And it looks cool, you know?
Yeah.
I have a Vegvasir on my elbow. It's a Nordic rune of exploration and sort of, it's supposed to mean some good luck, and it's supposed to be kind of, I guess, just an explorer's rune, I think. I have this piece of rope and this bar on my arm. The bar is for a buddy, a really, really close friend who unfortunately took his own life, and it's sort of a stylized scar. But the rope is separate. It's for myself trying to maintain a connection with who I was growing up when I was overweight versus who I am now, and trying not to get too confused through that transformation. Sort of, I want to maintain a connection with who I was. I don't want to turn into a douchebag, you know, is what I'm trying to say. Because I look super, super different than I used to. I lost what's now 140 pounds. So
awesome.
thanks. Yeah.
Huge.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? And to do that in the middle of your adolescence is, to say the least, a confusing thing to go through. It's positive, but it's not easy. So I've tried to, I guess, maintain just a connection with like the sweetheart of a fat kid I used to be. You know. Yeah. I got this one on my leg that says "Dance in Fire" because I'm a badass. That's pretty much the only meaning there. But yeah, I guess that's part of the tour. If you want more, you'll have to hit up my OnlyFans. I'm kidding. Come on.
Great. I've been too afraid to get a tattoo. I can't commit to anything.
Yeah, I feel that. I feel that totally. And I have a lot of friends that do that or kind of have the same ideas. But yeah, I don't know. I like sending it. To me, it's like I want to get tattoos sooner rather than later, because then I have more life lived with tattoos.
Sure. That makes sense.
Good. So once you were both winners, and then the time came to put a book together, was there anything tough, difficult, interesting, weird about that process?
I mean, Writers of the Future, I guess, or Galaxy Press, I don't really know what to refer to here. The entity that puts the book out, all of those pieces together, they do such a great job streamlining everything, right? And making the artists feel like they've accomplished something big, right? Because they have. I've gotten nothing but amazing vibes from every person that I've dealt with through Writers of the Future, and they really take, at least from my perspective, I'm curious what happens for the artists, but for the illustrators, I mean, for the writers, we work with the editors on anything that maybe needs to be tweaked or changed, but at least in my case, there wasn't that much that got tweaked. I had a crisis moment where I considered changing Dart's name after the story got accepted because I had watched an episode or two of Stranger Things, and there's like a little creature that's one of the kids' friends in one of the seasons, and he names it Dart, short for D'Artagnan. And I thought, oh man, everyone's gonna read this and think that I saw this show and I'm just ripping it off for absolutely no reason. And they talked me down back from that cliff. And the story is what it is today. That was really the only thing though. And since then, it's been a lot of sort of, this is a weird time because of COVID, but guiding us through the process of what it's like to put a book out, how you need to do events like this and really promote yourself and promote the book that you're a part of, to not just get more sales, but to get yourself more opportunity to write and to talk about writing and things like that.
Brock, same question. The editorial process, all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah, well, I actually had like a lot of back and forth with my editor. That not on her part, my editor was Echo Chernik, or I guess my art director would be the right term. And she is like a super close personal friend to mine. And I for a long time would go over to her house and play Shadowrun with her and her husband, Laz. And so I live pretty close to them. And so during the month period that they gave me to do the illustration, I was over at her house like every other day, if not every day, just like, hey, Echo, what about this? What about this? What do you think about this, this, and that? And I mean, it's I don't know how much detail I should get into in terms of like the actual process of painting the piece, but there a lot of the difficulty was just technical and internal. It didn't really have much to do with Zack's story because he did such a good job on the story, and it was already such a powerful story. I was just trying to not embarrass it.
Well, you didn't embarrass it.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going for. I mean, yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. I worked super hard on that piece. I don't think I've ever worked harder on a piece. And I don't.
Is that a physical piece of art, or is it all electronic?
It's electronic. Yeah, I painted it on Procreate with the iPad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Similar to Photoshop. Yeah.
It's amazing how it looks nothing like I imagined while I was writing it, and yet it captures exactly the tone of the story.
Dude, that is like the best compliment
yeah
you could have given. Hell yeah. I'm so glad to hear that.
Nice.
Okay.
One of the sidebar questions talks about the discipline to take a project from beginning through the end. So person says, unfinished books are a problem of mine because I'm always flitting from one project to another, losing inspiration on one, being anxious to start the next thing. Brock, and then Zack, any advice, any suggestions?
Dude, I totally understand that feeling. I've felt like I've never been able to finish pieces a million times before, and I think acceptance is probably the biggest thing. Is just accepting yourself as along for the ride on your process or your journey as an artist and your progression, and not feeling like you have to hit the finish line on every piece, you know, and I just knowing when to stop. Because I mean, in my personal experience, I've had so many times where I overwork a piece, like I don't know when to stop because I'm too afraid of the final result. I'm too afraid of that okay, here it is.
Art is never finished, it's just abandoned.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Just going back, you just have to like accept where you are in your process and be like, this is where it is. This is where my piece is, and this is what, not just that piece, but this is where I am in my life as an artist. This is where my skills lie. I could get better, but I could do better, but you know, I guess I just have to make a new piece and accept what this one is, and don't be too hard on yourself, even though, or it's hard to balance. Be hard on yourself, but like not always.
Yeah. Zack?
Writing, I was thinking about this earlier when I was thinking about things Brock and I could talk about. One of the reasons I don't do like visual art very much at all is because to me it feels like there's less room to go back and change things, so to speak, right? Like I'm sure there's ways to do it, especially if you're doing it digitally. I'm not really very hip to that technology, But for writing, you can always go back and change things. For music, you can always, you're replaying the song every time, so you can change things. It's totally ephemeral every time, right? And that gives you a door to put things away for a long time and then come back to them and completely change them. Thinking about this story here, where I turned in one version of it, it got rejected, and it came back to me, and I mixed things around, and I completely changed how I was approaching it, and I turned it back in again, and it got accepted here, right? Giving yourself the space to put things away, I think, is really important. More important than that, though, is it sounds like you're still doing the work of figuring out what your process is as an artist. I don't think there's anything that Brock and I could say. I mean, maybe there's something we could say that would trigger you to realize what your process is as an artist. But more importantly than that, you need to just put in the time to figure out what works for me, because it's completely different for everybody. It may be that your style is start things, drop them, start something else, and eventually something will capture your attention and will hold you in long enough to complete it, right? Or maybe it is you start 10 things and then you realize they can all be smushed together. You can pull ideas from each of them. Outside of that, the only thing I would say in addition, like for my particular process, is I always put something down on the page, no matter how blocked I feel as a writer, because the editing, I think I said this earlier, the editing process for fiction really is where the magic happens, in my opinion, right? When I think of it as word vomit, I sit down at the computer, I'm thinking, I really want to write about a giant robot today. And I start just putting stuff about giant robots on the page. I think, oh, I'm a little kid at the foot of a giant robot. It's raining. I'm looking up. For some reason, I'm a Buddhist monk, or I'm training to be a Buddhist monk one day. The robot fell from the stars. Like, oh, I got something here. It's interesting. An interesting image. I'm writing it out. Put it down for a day or two. I come back to it later and I'm like, oh, I know exactly what would make this more interesting. I know exactly what would improve the experience of this story. And I start changing stuff. That's my process. And it all hinges on putting something down first before you do something else. But again, you will find your own process that works for you. I always go back to the idea of like the pantsers, the improvisers versus the outliners, right? Stephen King, you can kind of tell, just improvises his way through his books, right? But
longer and longer.
Orson Scott Card outlines his books in extreme detail and then writes them in a very short amount of time. I couldn't think of two more different ways of approaching an artistic process. And it sounds like, just like I am, I'm still on my journey figuring out what it is, how it is I work. But, you know, you just have to keep putting things down and it'll show itself to you, the process.
Yeah. Sidebar question, relating a little bit, talking about rejections from publishers before you found success. Probably that works for the art side too. How do you deal with rejection, and what advice do you have for hopeful writers to keep them believing in themselves when they're rejected by publishers?
I have a big old Excel spreadsheet. It's actually a Google Sheets if we're going to get specific. It's got all of the markets you can send stuff to on one side, and it's got all the stories I've written going across the top, and it's just a big mess of X's. Right. So
that's excellent.
I just sold another story to Asimov's, and I put a big green paint on. I filled it with green paint or whatever in the box, and it's very exciting for me. All of those X's though are learning process, right? It's not necessarily that the story is bad, right? The As Able to Air, before it got accepted here, was rejected a number of places, including Asimov's, where I have a relationship with Sheila Williams, the editor, who's an amazing editor. She rejected it. She gave me a very good reason why it was rejected. And then it was accepted here, right? It's not necessarily about the quality of the work. It's about what the editor is looking for. How to deal with rejection. How do you normally deal with rejection? Right? What do you do? What is your, I'm going to sound like a therapist now, but what is your coping skill for rejection? It sounds like Brock goes and punches people, which is fine, you know?
Hey man,
Maybe
it
not
works.
people.
Well, he's boxing, right?
Yeah.
He's punching people.
Yeah.
He's punching somebody.
Yeah.
I don't know for sure. Yeah. Well, trying to at least.
Dealing with rejection, Brock.
Dude, I think going back to what I was talking about earlier, just acceptance. Accept that all you are is a bundle of cells and a bundle of thoughts. That's literally your entire existence, in my opinion. That's the way I live my life. And just realizing you're only here for like 85 years. Don't take yourself too seriously. You're going to make mistakes and you're going to learn from them. And you have to have the courage to accept that. You have the courage to like drop your ego and not think of yourself as some sacred thing, and just be able to shoot the shot, and shooting the shot and having the courage to, but then also like releasing your ego from that and being able to accept the outcome no matter what it is, and trying to hold on to your personal value through all that. And that's the thing that's going to like help you through it a lot, is just like understanding like there's parts of me that I love and there's parts of me that are awesome and I have personal value. And although if I were to be accepted by this community of people that would love my illustration, or in Zach's case, his story, that would be great. But I don't need that to have value for where I am. And dude, it's so hard to do. It's so hard. And I don't blame anybody for having the difficulty in going through that. It takes so much courage. And to me, dude, I'm switching to boxing, and I'm telling you, I am more afraid of a blank page than I am of Mike Tyson in his prime. I'm not kidding. I'm more afraid of a blank page than I am of Deontay Wilder or Francis Ngannou. It's a terrifying experience. It takes so much courage, and then you have to just realize that's your gig as an artist. You're getting paid to be courageous. You're getting paid to face that blank page.
You're actually reminding me that the best advice that I've gotten about this, and that I usually take to heart, is why are you doing it, right? Why are you writing the story? Are you writing it because you want to tell people that you got printed in some magazine somewhere, especially a print magazine that's going to be dead soon, right? Like, is that what you want? Or do you want to have work that you get to share with people? If you can at the very least get a few people, and I have people in my life, some of them are here, who read stories that I send to them, and the conversations I get to have with those individual people about what I wrote and what they experienced from what I wrote are more important to me than getting an acceptance. Getting an acceptance feels amazing, right? Not going to deny that. But those longer conversations you get to have with people you trust about what's happened in your story and how it made them feel and what they reacted to, that feels amazing. And if you can get that, if you can find those people in your life, and they don't have to be people you can, there's Writers of the Future Forum, by the way, is a great place to meet people who write and share work. If you can find that in your life and realize I write because I like the process and I like sharing with people, then that can carry you through all of those X's on your on your Google Sheets or whatever.
I love that. And I feel like that goes back to what you were talking about earlier of saying, like, if there were no art forms, what if you just had pure empathy? Right. That's what art really is all about, is expressing and connecting. That's it. That's the most important part. And I totally agree with you.
Sounds right. Yeah. One of the questions is for Brock. It's talking about the symbolism in your art. If you want to maybe put that back up and talk about the woman in the flower and the feather and the sword. Tell us a little bit about this, about the things you've got in there.
Well, so the woman is, so obviously Erto, first and foremost focal point. He is miserable. He doesn't have emotional depth in his environment. He's drained and he feels cold and he feels like gunmetal. It's at least the expression I was going for. The lady, I actually forgot her name, but basically the romantic interest. I wanted her to feel seductive and tempting in a playful but also subtly mistrusting way, because of the fact that she is government regulated, or she's sort of administered to him from the military. And to me, it seems like she was there to keep him in check and to keep him more like a sheep and less to stop him from asking questions and to just distract him. And that's what I feel like she's doing in this piece, is she's just trying to tickle him literally with a feather and distract him.
Mm.
The displays on the screens are pretty abstract. I wasn't really going for anything too deep or meaningful. I was just trying to make it look cool. The guy, of course, man. Hey, that's the medium, right? That's
Science
it,
fiction.
man. That's what you're right. The guy in the corner, that's the general, or general. I forgot. Wait, no, is he a general, Zach, or is another title? Major. That's what he was. Yeah, that's him. I just wanted him to be like menacing and overlooking and sort of just like disapproving. Kind of a. To me, it felt like a little bit of I don't know, just an authority figure, right? He's the villain. The sword at the bottom. I was thinking about what the wasteland was going to look like between these proxy robots, and one of the things that I grew up loving as a kid, it was Gundam. Gundam fights are awesome, and there's some of the most epic things that there are. Or Neon Genesis Evangelion, if you've seen that.
Oh,
Those are huge influences for me. And so I was like, all right, dude, we got a robotic wasteland. You bet your ass I'm doing a giant robot. And so I just did a huge fallen robot with a sword in his face and Dart, crawling over it looking for mines. But I mean, other than that, overall, what I was trying to go for was just like pretty sci-fi nighttime vibes. Something engaging. That's pretty much it.
Yeah. I think we're coming close to our time, so I thought I'd ask about next steps. One of the big deals coming up is the red carpet, right? Tell us about that. Once the COVID thing is hopefully passed.
Yeah, it's now, to my understanding, I don't know if I'm supposed to reveal this or not, but it's pushed to next year. So now it's going to be, I believe, the same week as volume 37. So we're all going to be there together, all in a petri dish of COVID. Just kidding.
For those who don't know, tell them
Sure.
what's going to happen.
So the Writers of the Future, every year, every quarter of the year, they pick three illustrator winners and 3 writer winners. And at the end of the year, although actually it's in April, at the end of the year, there's a big red carpet event, as you alluded to, where sort of a grand award is given to the winningest winning of the authors and illustrators.
That's going to be me and Zach, by the way.
Yeah.
And then everybody else gets the whatever award they got as part of the winnings. And there's also a week-long writers and illustrators retreat leading up to the red carpet, where we get to learn about our respective businesses from, true professionals. Really exciting and interesting thing. I'm very excited about it. It's weird that it's getting pushed a whole year, right? I wonder what it'll feel like to go there a whole year later, but it's actually great now that we get to spend the time with the next year's winners. It's like we get to be every year, it feels like, is a club, right, of all the winners from that year, and now we get to be a part of this super club next year. So that's exciting.
So otherwise, what are you working on next, Brock? Then Zach.
Zach, you can go first. Yeah.
Go Zach.
I'm always working on new stories and always submitting all the time. And this is going back to that last question. I know it's hard to do that. It's hard to get those rejections. When I can't tell you how many times I've woken up to a rejection from Clark's World or wherever it was that I was sending a story to, and been like, okay, and you get up and you brush your teeth, walk the dog, sit down, start writing again. I'm working on a lot of ideas for new stories. I want to build out my catalog, I guess is a word to use, of short stories as I sort of I'm percolating ideas for bigger pieces. But I'm also entering a PhD program in the fall at the school where I'm graduating from, family science. So going to be doing a lot of that, and continuing to work on music as well in the DC area.
Yeah. Brock, yeah?
Yeah, well, I mean, I still doodle from time to time just to keep my expressions, getting out there. And it's actually really nice now that I've committed to boxing professionally. I take myself a lot less seriously, and it helps with that courage in a huge way. Other than that, I've just been during quarantine, like jumping rope and running stairs, obviously, for training. And I think a lot about the things that I want to do in terms of the presentation with boxing, and this incorporates with animation too, and with what Zach was talking about. I love fantasizing about hologram technology and where it might be when in like 5 or 10 years. And I like thinking or just brainstorming ideas of what it would be like to enter a boxing ring in the walkout with like an actual hologram display of a Gundam suit on me, and then have like a freaking dragon breathe fire on me as I'm walking to the ring, and then the armor melts off, and it's all holograms, right? So none of it matters. But like, there's cool music playing. There's like ladies with pantsuits and katanas dancing, shit like that. Like, I want to be a very flavorful and creative boxer, and I want to incorporate animation in my training videos for Instagram. Just montage stuff like that. That's what I'm trying to be like a really colorful, creative boxer. And one of the things I'm really excited about is that I feel like my studies in the art world have influenced me in a way, especially with human anatomical knowledge, that a lot of other boxers probably don't have and don't understand the value of, because what the sport is literally you're just two bodies in a space throwing bones. And when you study it like it's an animation, and when you really understand the forms and their specific shapes, and not looking at it like every punch is a line, you're just drawing a line. You're not. There's a whole pathing of three-dimensional forms moving through space. It's so much more complicated than, oh, this is a cross and this is a hook. It's not just straight or curved. It's art. And so, yeah, I mean, that's what I'm trying to work on. It's just getting better at that.
For the next season of Love, Death, and Robots.
Yeah.
Oh, dude, that'd be sick. I fucking love that show. Yeah, dude.
And that reminds me, I should have said this when I was talking. I mentioned earlier I have a new story coming out in Asimov's science fiction. I don't know the month yet, but the story is called Pull It from the Root. So if you want, like, very specifically, that is the very next thing that I'm doing. I'm still learning how to self-promote. So sorry, jumping in here trying to learn how to do this.
Squeezed it in.
Squeezed it in.
That's good. Here we go. Thank you, Zach and Brock, for sharing the story and the art and your experiences with us. I also want to thank everyone who joined us tonight. Please check out our social media outlets and our website for more, hopefully soon, virtual events coming up, including talks from Clarion West instructors. Thanks to everyone, and have a great evening.
Yeah, this was such a pleasure. Thank you. I really appreciate it. And Zach, thank you as well. Thank
you. Yeah, this has been an awesome experience. And I see somebody is asking where to find us. Brock, I think you have a website. I don't know if I'm making that up.
Ooh,
I know
Instagram.
I'm
typing it in for them right now.
Put it out there.
I'm going to type it in as well. I have a website. My website is zackbe.com. It's pretty simple. And also my Instagram I'm going to put there. Instagram, actually, this is my handle everywhere, these two.
Send to... Yeah, my Instagram is just brock.art.
Well, that's simple. Nice, straightforward.
Yeah. Yeah,
all right.
And it's in there.
Great.
Come find me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, you so
everybody.
much. See you guys.